So, how do you think we learn? You're probably thinking, practice, rewards, maybe even a little bit of punishment. But what if I told you one of the most powerful ways we learn is just by watching? Yeah, just watching. Let's get into it because the story of how we discovered this is, well, it's pretty strange. And it all kicks off in a university lab. All right, I want you to picture this. It's 1961. You're just walking around the Stanford campus, and you glance through a window into a lab. And what you see is bizarre. There's a grown woman, and she is just aggressively punching an inflatable clown right in the neck, over and over and over again. So what in the world was going on there? Well, what you would have seen was actually a landmark experiment by a psychologist named Albert Bandura. He was onto something huge, a really important idea in psychology, and it all revolved around this one inflatable clown, whose name, by the way, was Bobo. So let's break down what was really happening. Okay, so the experiment setup was, it was so simple, but just brilliant. Here's how it worked. First step, a little kid just sits and watches an adult absolutely go to town on this Bobo doll for about 10 minutes, just wailing on it. Then, to kind of stir the pot, they take the kid to another room that's filled with awesome toys, and then they take them all away. Total frustration move, right? And for the final step, they take this now frustrated kid into a third room and leave them all alone with, yep, you guessed it, Bobo the clown. So, what do you think happened? And the result? Honestly, it was a little scary. The kids who saw the adult get aggressive, well, they did the exact same thing. They mimicked the aggression almost perfectly. They were punching Bobo, kicking him, throwing him around. Some of them even grabbed a toy hammer and went after him. But here's the kicker. The kids who saw an adult play nicely with Bobo or just ignore him completely, they didn't show that same aggression at all. Now, this wasn't just some weird one-off experiment. This was a huge deal back then. Why? Because it completely challenged the main theory of learning at the time, something called behaviorism. For decades, behaviorism was king. It basically said that we learn through simple rewards and punishments, things scientists could see and measure. But Bandura's experiment showed that there was a giant piece of the puzzle missing. You know behaviorism, right? Think of Pavlov's dogs drooling when they hear a bell. It's all about stimulus and response. The theory basically ignored what was going on inside your head. Your thoughts didn't really matter. But what Bandura brought to the table with his social cognitive view was a whole new dimension. He said, hey, wait a minute. Our thoughts, our social world, and what we observe, that stuff is absolutely central to how we learn. And that wasn't the only problem with old school behaviorism. Critics pointed out that it completely ignored our biology. For instance, let's say you eat some bad oysters and get super sick. You're going to develop a hatred for the taste of oysters, right? Not the look of the restaurant where you ate them. That's because we humans are biologically hardwired to connect sickness with taste. But a bird might avoid a certain looking berry if it gets sick, because they're all about sight. The point is, our biology predisposes us to learn some things way easier than others. And there was another thing behaviorism just couldn't explain. It's this concept called latent learning. It's basically all the stuff we learn passively, without even trying, and with no reward at all. That knowledge just sits there in the back of your brain, kind of hidden, until you suddenly have a reason to pull it out. Has this ever happened to you? You're in a new city or a new neighborhood, just kind of wandering around, and a tourist stops you and asks for directions, and you shock yourself because you actually know the way. That is exactly what latent learning is. You are building this mental cognitive map the whole time without even noticing. Nobody gave you a gold star for it. You just absorbed it. Okay, so all of this, the limits of behaviorism, this idea of latent learning, it all leads us back to the big idea, the thing that finally solves the mystery of the Bobo doll. This is the concept Bandura really brought into the spotlight, the incredible, incredible power of modeling, or what we call observational learning. And it's exactly what it sounds like. We learn by watching other people. We see what they do, and then we copy them. It's that simple. You don't always need to do it yourself. You don't need a direct reward to learn how to do something. You can just watch and learn. And hey, this isn't just for us humans. The animal kingdom is full of this stuff. You've got chimpanzees who watch their buddies to figure out how to use sticks to fish for ants. Young rhesus macaques actually learn to be more chill after a fight just by watching the more peaceful older monkeys. Crows, pigeons, primates, you name it, imitation is everywhere out there. And for us humans, oh man, this kind of modeling drives so much of our culture. I mean, just think about it for a second. New slang words, the latest fashion trends, those viral dances that take over the internet, how do they spread? Through observation and imitation. It's literally one of the fundamental engines of our society. Okay, so this all makes sense, right? It feels intuitive. But that leads to a much deeper question. How does our brain actually pull this off? What's going on up there? What's the biological hardware that lets us learn just by watching someone else? Well, funny enough, the answer started to take shape because of another, you guessed it, completely accidental discovery. This time, let's jump to a lab in Parma, Italy, back in the early 90s. So you've got these researchers, and they're monitoring a monkey's brain. They have this little monitor hooked up that buzzes anytime the monkey does something, like grab a piece of fruit. So one day it's hot, and one of the researchers just wanders into the lab eating an ice cream cone. The monkey's not doing anything, just sitting there watching the guy eat his ice cream. And then something incredible happens. The monitor buzzes. The monkey's brain fired in the exact same pattern as if it were eating the ice cream itself, just by watching. This mind-blowing event led to the discovery of something called mirror neurons. These are a special kind of brain cell. And get this, they fire both when you perform an action and when you just watch someone else perform that exact same action. They're basically the brain's built-in imitation hardware. This is the biological root of how we learn by watching and maybe even things like empathy. Okay, so let's tie this all together. The Bobo doll, latent learning, mirror neurons. Why does any of this really matter to you and me? Well, it's incredibly important because it means that the people we watch, the models we're exposed to, they are constantly, and I mean constantly, shaping who we become. The takeaway here is, well, it's profound. If we surround ourselves with positive, supportive models, we are way more likely to act that way ourselves. But just like we saw with the Bobo doll, if we're exposed to negative or aggressive models, especially when we're kids, it can have some really serious antisocial effects. This stuff doesn't just shape what we do, it shapes what we believe, what we aspire to be.
The writer George Bernard Shaw really nailed it. He once said, imitation is not just the sincerest form of flattery, it's the sincerest form of learning.
And going back even further, the statesman Lord Chesterfield put it this way: we are, in truth, more than half what we are by imitation. Think about that. What we see around us literally becomes who we are. It's such a powerful reminder about being mindful of who we watch, who we learn from, and how we ourselves act in front of others. And so that leaves us with just one last really important question you should ask yourself. Who are you imitating?